Hello and welcome to another edition of Pulp Picks. My name is Patrick.
I'm Fritz.
And we're here to give you this week's reading recommendations on New Comic Book Day. Again, another light week. I'm not entirely sure why. I guess we're just kind of ramping up for the spring books and all that kind of stuff coming. But we've got a brand new book from you in the Star Wars universe. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah, so my pick this week is Star Wars Legacy of Vader #1. Book I kept just calling the Kylo Ren book because, I mean, that's objectively what it is. So this book is obviously a new series set between episodes 8 and 9, and it's about Kylo Ren, now that he's the leader of the First Order, trying to figure out what that really, means for him. And he's kind of realizing, I don't really know what to do now. It's very much it's the dog chasing the car thing,
dog
where
that
it's just
caught the car. Yeah,
it's just well, I did it. Now what?
Right.
There's this great bit where he's talking with Hux, and it's just so me and Snoke never really talked about the military side of any of this. Do you want to give me a lowdown on how things are? And it's a great conversation. So the series is written by Charles Soule, who has been doing a bunch of Star Wars for a long time now, both the comics and including other Kylo Ren and Vader related stuff. He wrote the second volume of the Vader comic. He did the Kylo origin comic. He just got done doing the main Star Wars book. He's also done a bunch of the actual paper paperback books and all that. So dude's been
Chuck knows Star Wars.
Yes, but yeah. So with that, he's able to weave in a lot of stuff here. You get a lot of fun interactions between Kylo and Hux, where I love Hux because he's such a sniveling little character. There's this bit where he's just we can bring back the Empire like our forebears, and Kylo's just no, my forebears shaped the galaxy. Your forebears created lieutenants and lick spittles. We are not on the same level. Don't it. And it's funny because they're kind of the closest thing each other has to a friend, but they also absolutely hate each other.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a fun dynamic. But Kylo's whole thing here is he's still very much in his let the past die kind of mode. So it's just that means I've got to get rid of my connections to Vader. So he goes to Vader's old castle on Mustafar, you see in Rogue One. And it's just I'm gonna wipe this place out. And some things happen, and he's maybe not.
Oh, does he end up inhaling Vader ashes or something weird like that?
Not quite. But he
I don't remember. Is that actual canon, or was that one of those scenes that got cut? That got cut, right?
As far as I'm aware, that's not a thing that happened. But
there was okay, I'll go to the internet.
Yeah, but yeah, no, he has something happen there where it's just okay, maybe I need to rethink some of my approaches. And so as the title suggests, this is going to be him kind of going through Vader's life and really kind of seeing how it made him the man he was. And obviously this being between 8 and 9, we know by the time we get to 9, he's in a very weird place of just not really sure what he wants to do now. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of bridges that gap, which again Soule is really good about connecting dots between all these different Star Wars things. It's kind of been a huge part of his job working on these comics. But
I imagine that it is really difficult to step in and do writing on stuff like this. Art, I think there's probably a high bar of expectation for people, but you've got so much reference material that one would think, capable artists can step in and do a pretty good job. But writer, man, do they have an exam or something that you have to study for and take before they give you the reins? Because there's so much to know. And B, particularly with these movies, I think most people agree that the 3 most recent movies are disjointed story-wise. So
there's certainly a mixed response.
Well, and I mean, just, the stories are... They're moving in different directions because they have different creative directions. And so to create that connective tissue between them has got to be a challenge.
Yeah. But honestly, he's off to a great start here. Also, you mentioning the art, Luke Ross does a great job. He does what I feel a lot of artists on Star Wars books have a hard time, where he's able to capture the likeliness of, because obviously these are based on like live action people.
Yep.
Like they're these people's likeliness without things feeling like too kind of like stiff or like just too photorealistic. Where
Sure.
it's just like, oh, they just like traced over like.
Not that
Adam Driver's
that's
face.
ever happened with any Star Wars artists. In Marvel
never.
Comics.
But no, he does a perfectly like. He does a perfect job of like getting that right balance down. Just like you never like you always know. Oh, that's clearly like Adam Driver without it feeling like they're just like photo bashing a Kyle like Adam Driver into the comic. His quiet moments are really good. His like emotion stuff is really good. The action, there's this great bit where Kyle's like charging up like a staircase fighting some people. That's really well done. Just great stuff here on both fronts. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and Star Wars is one of those comics where you've got to be able to nail the action and the poses because there's a lot of both in Star Wars. Yeah.
And Ross, and because he's done some other Star Wars stuff for them at this point already. So like he's also pretty versed in this wheelhouse. So you've got people who really know what they're doing working on this, and it shows.
Awesome.
And really enjoyed the start to this.
Yeah, very cool.
But speaking of another kind of angry boy.
Yes, well, it is a smaller release week. And two massive heavy hitters were on the list. So we had to go with them. They're just so good. And I'm back with Absolute Superman number 4. It's really interesting because, on a number of these videos, we talk about subscription levels and people adding or canceling titles. And Absolute Superman has definitely been picking up steam. We have had a lot more people. Maybe it's tied to the response to the trailer for the new Superman movie.
I know people definitely do seem excited about Superman. So.
Yeah, well, and I think that we're kind of, people are... We've had dark and gritty for decades now. Maybe people are ready for uplifting and, somebody who can be kind of a symbol of something bigger and better. And that's very much what this comic is about thematically. So we've hit the point where we've kind of introduced a lot of the major characters, and we know that Lois Lane is not a reporter. She's working for Lazarus, which is kind of the governing body here.
Yeah, it's
or the enforcement wing.
Yeah, it's this weird, like,
body.
They seem to be some kind of, like, weird, like, paramilitary corporation thing that, like, seems to have its fingers in everything.
Yeah, and So we get some interactions between her and her dad, and that's an interesting dynamic. Pretty much all the time, that is a strained relationship in any reality that they've put those two in. But basically, she's had this interaction with Superman. She can't even process how it's making her feel.
Yeah.
Like, she believed deeply in what she was doing. She had this interaction with him. What happened was contrary to her worldview, and she's trying to reconcile it. So it's done enough for her to not completely trust the system within she works, but also she has not abandoned it.
Yeah.
So there's this group called the Omega Men, who are basically terrorists or freedom fighters, depending on your point of view. And she has an interaction with one of them who turns out to also be a major Superman character. That was very fun.
Which they kind of
not a shock. The first panel that you see this person in, you will know exactly who it is.
Which is funny because it almost feels like they tried to bear the lead on it at first, and then that later on they're just like, no, it's what you think it is.
Yeah. It was kind of fun. But, and then we also get to see kind of how Superman's impact on people is not always positive. So we get this interview with all these different people that he's had a positive impact on as Lois is trying to track him down and get more information on him. All of these people are being very protective of him and then very positive of him.
Yeah.
Saved some guy from a falling crane and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then there's also the peacemakers.
Yeah. And
one in particular
having a real rough go of it.
He's not enjoying the way that Superman makes him feel. So it's been a very interesting dichotomy of the impact of somebody with incredible superhuman powers trying to be altruistic, make a positive impact in people's lives, but how that can also have negative repercussions. So and that's kind of where the book ends, is you're kind of left holding that bag. I have a very strained relationship with Jason Aaron. There have been many times where I've started a Jason Aaron book and really, really liked it. There have been a few that I haven't liked it, and there have been a number that I've liked all the way through. There have been some where halfway through I go, why are we doing this now? This is unraveling for me. So far, this has been exceptionally well written.
Really, really solid work on this part.
I was so pensive when Jason Aaron was announced as the writer on this book, because I was hopeful for the absolute stuff, but I wasn't really sure. It felt like it was kind of a copycat game of the ultimate stuff that Marvel's doing. It also felt like DC doesn't have a great track record of doing a whole new universe where it's a reimagining of characters. Sometimes it works really, really well, usually in a very small pocket where there's a distinct start and end to the story, not open-ended like this. I have zero complaints. No notes for Jason Aaron. This has been really good. You can tell that he has gone back and read some Golden Age Superman, because the roots of the character are so strong here. And to the point where I think a lot of people will feel that it's not classic Superman-like, because Superman was so rewritten in the 50s, the mid-50s, and then into the Silver Age. Yeah, by the 40s, sure. And, a lot of that was that DC took over creative control and put other people on it, and it ended up being a real, communal kind of process, including non-comic book entities, radio show, film, cartoons, all of that added to the Superman lore. And and so it kind of got muddled. But this is very much based on the original concept of Superman and why he could be a positive impact, or why he could have a positive impact on society. So do a little reading on the history of Superman and the creation of him and why he was written the way that he was written. It was in response to some stuff that was happening at the time. We don't need to go into all of that in the video, but there is definitely nods to that in here. All right, so that having been said, here's another book that has a lot of similarities in that it is somebody standing up against the social systems that people feel make them safe. But do they really?
Yep. So joint pick this week is going to be Ultimates number 9. Big shocker to anyone who's been watching this. This has definitely been one of our rating champs, I would say.
I love Luke Cage. I have always... He's one of those great characters where his aesthetic is weird. His initial aesthetic is weird. The concept is sketchy at best, in that not that the message necessarily was bad, but people writing the message maybe weren't the best people, but they were the people we had at the time.
I mean, it's kind of exactly what you expect when you think like Marvel trying to do a blaxploitation book.
Precisely. Yeah. But the bones were there in a way that the core of the character has a message and a point of view that can get people thinking differently from their own safe corner of the world. So, in the Ultimates, what's different about this Luke Cage versus the 616 Luke Cage?
I mean, the main thing is he's still in prison.
Right.
Yeah. So, basically, like, the first issue of this is kind of like him first being like told, like, hey, you're going to prison, but because of the weird way the sentencing works, you might get out in a year. So hey, it's not that bad.
That was such a painful scine to read.
And then literally the rest of the book is like the next 20 years of him just being like stuck in prison. And it's really interesting because it flashes back and forth between like where he is like right now, and then like how like over the years how we got from like here to there on this stuff. And
it's crazy. It jumps around a lot. Your head will spin.
Oh yeah, no. And it's super cool because you get these like, you get the juxtaposition of like where he is now. Like he is very much like he's a man with a plan. Like you kind of like, as this issue goes, so you realize like, oh, okay, you start to understand like how like all this time in prison has like really started to affect him and like change him and how he's grown.
Correct.
And it's so fascinating to see that against like where you get these flashbacks where it's him like just trying to like read up on stuff, where he's like learning. Like there's this bit where he's just like straight up like, you see the cover of the book, he's reading Soul Dad Brother, which if you don't know is the actual accounts of a former prisoner deal, like being like, hey, here's all the like horrible things they do to you in prison.
Yeah.
And a big part of this book is him like trying to like teach the other inmates like, hey, here's like how this whole works. Like here's like the power structure that we are like stuck in. And that's like a huge thing here is him like talking about like who has the power, like like, and it's not just like a matter of like us in the prison, like people outside are in a different prison too.
There is an excellent point that he makes about that. All right, so not to get divisive or super controversial or anything, but a book like this is going to bring up some topics with people that here in our local comic shop and on the internet, we see a lot of the same stuff. And so I'm sure it's conversations that happen anywhere that deals with popular culture. When a book brings up social issues or issues of division or whatever, you will always get comments along the lines of, do they have to cram this stuff down our throat in comic books? I just want my classic comic books that are not about this kind of stuff. All right, so let's just back this up. I get people's desire for escapism, especially in a world where divisive issues are pushed at seemingly more than ever, but I think some of that's revisionist too, but whatever. I don't want to get into that. I understand escapism and wanting to have a fantasy world where we don't have to deal with that. That's fine, right? But to say that comic books haven't always, from literally the very beginning, had social commentary or taken on issues of societal imbalance or whatever is just not accurate.
I mean, literally, even like the original like Luke Cage, like there are these elements of like unjust like imprisonment and stuff like that. Like it's literally baked into the character.
You can't not do it and do the character justice. And so to say like, oh, you know, they're pushing this point of view. Well, that's literally where this character started. He was, you know, he was treated poorly in prison and experimented on in the 616 universe. And so now we tie back into another parallel to Superman and Luke Cage. You know, they're similar in that both of these books were social commentary. Superman was social commentary from the beginning. That's the whole point of the character. So to say that, you know, it was just about truth, justice, and the American way, and he was just a guy that little kids looked up to, and he stopped bank robbers and evil scientists and stuff, it's just not where the character actually started. So I just want to put that out there. If you want escapism, that's fine. It's totally fine. That's not this book. That's not this book. That's more this book, I guess.
I mean, kind of, but like, I'd also argue like just conflating escapism with like being like pure fluff is also like, because part of how these things work is like, so like,
yeah, you're not doing anything.
This book is not like, you're not reading theory reading this book. Like that's part of what these things do though, is it's like it creates these like broader things that you can like filter these into that like acts as like a starting point for these kind of conversations. Like I mean, Star Wars is a similar thing of like the prequels are not like by any means like great political theory necessarily, but like they do very much like hit on the baseline concept of like, hey, like corruption leads to like complacency and further corruption, and like how these whole things like
everything
fall apart.
Has some I guess it's how transparent these stories. Right? You know, like it's whether they're thickly veiled or thinly veiled commentaries on society and in life. You know what the prequels really missed was they didn't spend nearly enough time on rules of order. We should have spent a lot more time on how voting worked.
To be fair, you say that, but like think of how many actual like popular shows are about that kind of stuff. Like,
I love spending a good Saturday afternoon watching shows about Robert's Rules. It's fantastic. Well, so the point being, like, this is heavily steeped in social commentary. The character is, if you don't realize that going in, and kind of Ultimates in general is, and the absolute line is like that's just kind of where it's at. So, you know, take that as you will. Like, it's just a thing, and it has been in comics forever. It's been in fiction forever.
Yeah. Oh, also Chris Allen's art, since we didn't really talk about that yet, really fantastic on here.
Thank you.
I loved their work on the most recent Black Panther series from a little while back, and getting to see them on here was really cool.
So it was especially challenging story to illustrate, I would assume, because we're jumping around in time so much, so you have to make those time jumps very apparent by just changing Luke's appearance, because his appearance obviously over a 20-year period changes.
Yeah. I also love
one of the things that he does is prison workouts.
Yes.
So dude gets jacked over 20 years.
I also love the way that he uses the 9-panel grid, because I've seen other artists do a similar thing where part of the use of the grid also like acts as like these prison bars on the actual like structure of the book.
Yeah.
Like I anytime one of my other favorite comics, These Savage Shores, does a similar thing. It's just such a cool way of like form and function, like being like such an integral part of the story being told.
Yeah, it really elevates the book and the story, which, you know, they allude to heavily right on the cover, right? Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, light week, but anything else that caught your eye this week that you enjoyed?
Let me think here. A couple of the other regulars I really enjoy, like Two-Face was really good.
Oh, yeah.
That series continues. So, like, that could have almost made it up here. Like, there's some interesting developments in this issue. But yeah, that's been really good. A lot of good DC stuff this week, because there was that, Shazam, just really solid all around. Anything on your front?
So we were talking about how Chip Zdarsky's run on Batman is wrapped up. I know people have had issues with the Zdarsky run, and I think that part of it was there were such high expectations going into it because of his Daredevil stuff, and there's a lot of similarities between those characters. I will say, reading some of Zdarsky's comments about being on that book at DC, it sounded like it was both one of those kind of dream come true, but careful what you wish for kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because Batman being the main DC character, I think editorial is holding those reins very tightly on the storytelling. Plus, you had the Absolute Power come in on the middle of it, and Batman was obviously a major character in that, so he had to write a lot of the lead into it, whatever. But this was a solid wrap up, and I'm very excited. I like where we left off here. It gives the next he put the toys back in the toy box, right? And so now the next writer gets to take out those toys and play with them. And I don't remember who's taking over.
Oh, do you not actually remember?
I don't.
Oh, it's Logan Lee.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, we're doing Hush again. Yeah. All right. So
I thought you were setting him for like a bit.
No. Lot going on. My brain is Swiss cheese.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
That's right. And honestly, when I heard that, I was like, this seems like a weird concept all the way around.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it gets executed. But Jim Lee, that's cool. Jeff Loeb, that's cool. So we'll see. Lightning in a bottle, maybe. Get struck by lightning twice, I guess, is kind of more where I was going with that. But yeah.
Oh, but speaking of getting struck by lightning, not twice, but thrice, next week we've got the third printing issue one of that coming.
Thank you for remembering. So we have had a bunch of people asking when we're getting more copies of Absolute Superman #1 next week. The 12th, Absolute Superman #1, third printing, hits shelves I will tell you, people are already signing up for copies
Yep.
of it. I ordered what I thought was a lot, and now it's not looking like a lot because of the number of people who are already signing up
Yeah.
for it. So if you are looking for a copy, do not hesitate. Call us or hop on the Comic Hub app and get your copy set aside for you. Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, so that's next week. In between now and then, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, and stop into the store. And we'll be back next week with all of the other new titles that come out with that third printing of Absolute Superman #1. Looks like a bigger week again. Also, as a quick side note, supplies from BCW are slowly starting to trickle back in. I don't know what was going on with supply there, but distributors did not have it. So we've got bags and boards for Current. We've got top loaders have come back in. We've got dividers are showing up this week. Backing boards for Current, I believe, are showing up this week. So we've got a whole bunch of that stuff showing up. So for all of you who have been asking us every week when you come in, when our supply is going to be here, they're starting to show up. So yeah, you can get those comics well taken care of.
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Well, we will be back next week with more picks. Until then, enjoy the reading. All right, so now that we don't have to do the reminder about the Absolute Superman third printing as the after credit scene, do you think that we should tease the big surprise that we're working on? Should we tell people that something big is in the works, but we can't tell them anything other than that?
I mean, as long as you're confident that it's actually going to happen.
Well, I think if we don't tell them what it is, it could fall through and we could just make up something else.
That's fair. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
Sure. All right. I'll just leave this here.
Who knows?